What's up, guys? This is Nate, your IGN sports editor. I'm here with Jeremy Dunham to talk about UFC versus Fight Night Round 4.
And I am not the sports editor, so I guess I win.
That's true, you are not the sports editor. Today we're going to be breaking down the presentational elements of both games, how both games fare in the ring, the online play, and the career modes for each. So, Jeremy, let's start with presentation. Why do you think Fight Night looks better? Why do you think it sounds better? Why do you think it's cooler just to be in the ring as opposed to the octagon?
Well, one of the things that really stands out for me for Fight Night over UFC in particular is it has a beat on its animations. I mean, I'll give UFC the fact that they definitely have the look of the sport down, but Fight Night's animations are incredibly realistic, and the way that the fighters react to both receiving and throwing punches, very realistic as well.
I do think the fighters in UFC do move well. They look very good. But one area where UFC definitely wins out is in the commentary. Joe Rogan and Mike Goldberg sound much better than Tessitore and Atlas. You have to concede that point.
Oh, nice kick. Combination, left, right.
Oh, of course. I mean, I'm not going to deny the fact that Fight Night's commentary sucks. It's not good at all. They're not very descriptive on who's doing what. You'll get comments like, oh, he's hitting him in the face. Well, obviously, we're in a boxing match, but that's definitely something that I think UFC definitely kicks its butt in.
He gets off with a combination up top.
All right, moving on to the mechanics. I think UFC 2009, it's a much more complex sport inherently than boxing. And I think the game as a whole does a wonderful job of capturing those complexities in both the stand-up and the ground game.
Well, I think that you're right to a point. I think that they definitely did a really good job of figuring out the best way to represent the sport through gameplay, but not necessarily the use of those moves is accurate. So you're going to knock a guy out more times than not. And in real UFC, how often do you actually see that happen? Not very often at all.
That's true.
In fact, I've been watching MMA for the last 10 plus years, and I can tell you submissions are very easy to come by in the sport, and they can be latched on any moment. I think it's far too reliant on the whole slam spam fact that they've got with wrestlers, where it's just picking them up, slamming them over and over again, and unless you have that low stamina bar, you can get out of the submissions way too easy.
Another point for the mechanics that I want to make is the countering and blocking in UFC feels better to me than it does in Fight Night. The countering in Fight Night is a camera zoom, and then the flash bulb that goes when you land a counter move. It just feels a little unnatural, a little forced. In UFC, it's you grabbing a leg and then throwing the guy on the ground as he's kicking. It feels more organic.
Well, it might feel that way, but it doesn't matter if punching a guy over and over again is going to knock him out 9 times out of 10 anyhow.
Well, that's true. 9 times out of 10 in UFC, it might be a knockout, but 10 times out of 10 in Fight Night, you're just going to be punching somebody's face, punching somebody's body. At least there's some variety. You have more of an option in UFC to take guys to the ground, to submit, to ground and pound.
All right, hold on here. So you're in boxing, a game where the entire philosophy is punch and not get punched. You're complaining there's not more to do than punch and not be punched?
I'm saying for people who want more variety in their fighting games, UFC might be the way to go. All right, moving on to online. This is a point where I think I'm just going to have to concede. While UFC it's lag-free, it performs well when you're fighting somebody in the ring, but there's that bug with the no losses being counted. There's no World Championship mode that Fight Night has. I'm basically making your point for you, Jeremy. Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, UFC Online sucks, man. I mean, think about it. The whole point of getting in a fight with someone online is to see who's going to win or lose. And when anyone can quit out of the match in UFC, which they can, and it has absolutely no bearing on what happens in the match.
And this has been a bug that they've known about for a long time.
It's still not fixed.
Patched, I know.
At least in Fight Night, if someone quits on you, not only do they get the loss for quitting, but they also get what's called a DNF, a do not finish percentage knock against them, so people can identify the quitters.
Holy cow!
All right, enough with online. I'll concede that point to Fight Night. You guys get that one. Moving on to the career mode, I think UFC has a much better structured career mode than what Fight Night offers. The training's better. There's the UFC camp that just feels much more natural than what Fight Night offers to me.
You're wrong, though. I mean, so let's be honest, they both suck. I mean, UFC's training is way too open. It has almost no direction for sparring, and the camp session requirements are pretty friggin' repetitive. Fight Night is actually more fun to play for me because they don't take as long, and at least are more focused. But that sucks too because all the attributes that you actually build in Fight Night's minigames don't really correlate to what you're doing. Why is punching the heavy bag only work my right hand and not my left hand? That makes no sense. It should work both hands.
Both games have good length, good progression as you advance through the ranks. I think career modes are a draw.
No. I'd actually give it a slight edge to Fight Night. I mean, I'll tell you why.
Why is that?
UFC, your fighter never ages. If you pick your created fighter at 22,
and you can't switch weight classes, which is a bummer.
Exactly. He's 22 for his entire career, all 7 years of it. And once you win a fight, which is after about 13 to 15 fights, you're essentially fighting the same 3 to 5 guys over and over and over again from that point forward. At least in Fight Night, Granted, the weight change system isn't as robust I'd like to see. You will get a more varied list of fighters, and it makes a big difference, I think, in terms of the variety and the amount of people you can fight.
Well, it looks like I've got to concede the career mode then as well.
And he goes down again.
So while Fight Night might win in the career battle against UFC, one area that it cannot compare is the classic fights the UFC offers. You get to play classic fights, you get to see video montages of what actually happened. It's a really cool representation of trying to match the real results from the past.
Yeah, I actually really like UFC's history stuff too, but I do wish they would have included entire fight videos instead of just 45-second clips. But I'd still argue that it's only modern history. You know, you look at the limitations of the UFC license, and you're not getting all-time Hall of Famers, guys like Hoist Gracie or Ken Shamrock or Dan Severn in there because of that. And also, you have to keep in mind that because of the UFC license, you're not going to get greats from other promotions like Kazushi Sakuraba or Fedor. At least in Fight Night, you can play with some all-time greats regardless of what era they're from or what belt they hold. So you get George Foreman, Marvin Hagler, Carlos Monzon, Frazier. The list goes on. And I think being able to play with those guys throughout history is much more important than just seeing a couple videos from the last couple of years.
I've got to concede the point that I think Fight Night is the better game overall.
And that's because it is. So I think you're right in agreeing with me.
And hopefully when UFC comes back next year, they'll be back bigger, badder, and stronger than ever.
Yeah, I actually think this first year is probably just the learning year for that game. I think that game has a lot of potential.
Exactly.
And taking everything they learned from all the mistakes that they made this year, I think next year it really has a lot of potential to go to the top of the combat sport heap. But right now, definitely Fight Night, round 4.